All right, you're good to go, Senator.
Hey, everybody, thanks for joining and thanks for letting us adjust backward 15 minutes to get me out of a help committee meeting where they needed me for voting on some bipartisan legislation, including some bills that I had co-sponsored. Three items, the Iran status, recent action of the Trump administration with respect to the special ed functions of the Department of Ed, and finally a Trump regulation that I tried to challenge on the floor yesterday unsuccessfully, but that I want to make sure everybody understands. First on Iran, an off-ramp to a foolish and illegal war is a good thing. So I'm glad that we're in an intermission, and I'm anxious to see the proposed deal that the Trump administration has structured with Iran. There has been reporting about the deal, the Memorandum of Understanding, which has a number of specific provisions, but then it also includes the recognition that more still needs to be negotiated. But if the Bloomberg reporting about the memorandum is accurate, and we'll know Friday, my summary of this deal is we gave up a whole lot more to get a whole lot less than we got in the JCPOA that Donald Trump foolishly tore up in his first term. I told him at the time, if you tear this up and you walk away from a diplomatic deal, you'll be making the wrong kind of history. The U.S. doesn't walk away from diplomatic deals that are working. You'll be not only giving Iran the excuse to restart their nuclear program, you will also alienate the allies that have worked with us on the deal, and you'll even eliminate one of the few areas of cooperation we had with Russia and China, which helped us structure that deal. And we're very interested, for their own reasons, in Iran not having a nuclear weapons program. We told the president, if you tear up this deal, you could be paving a path to war, an unnecessary war that will cost American lives, that will cost the American taxpayer, that will destabilize the region. It wasn't just people like me saying that. President Trump's own Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State told him the same thing. But he went ahead and tore up the deal anyway. And I believe he tore it up without understanding the deal. He knew one thing about it. President Obama had negotiated it. And so he said, it must be bad and I'm going to tear it up. Everything we told President, if you tear it up, this is going to happen, has now happened, including we told him North Korea will stop negotiating about a nuclear arms deal, because why would they do a deal with the United States and give up a nuclear capacity if the U.S. would tear up the deal even when North Korea was complying with it? That has come to pass. There's been no meaningful negotiations with North Korea in years since President Trump tore up the Iran deal. So we'll see what the actual deal is on Friday. But if it is the same as was reported in Bloomberg today with the 14 points of the deal laid out, this is a deal where the U.S. is giving up a lot more to get a lot less. We'll see what happens. But let's just say this: what a tragedy! 14 U.S. troops died. Iran realizing that it sort of had a nuclear weapon already because it could close off the Straits of Hormuz. We've probably spent now in excess of $50 billion in this war at day 109. And that's not the cost of replenishing our munitions stockpiles or rebuilding U.S. infrastructure that's been damaged in the region. And American taxpayers have paid well north of $50 billion in escalated gas prices, escalated airline tickets because of increases in jet fuel prices and other inflationary pressures that this war has driven. So we'll see what the deal is. But I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. The war was foolish and illegal. And so an off-ramp to this war is something that is good. We just have to make sure, if we've taken an off-ramp, that we don't allow a president to blunder us back into a war we shouldn't be in. And I'll keep insisting that my colleagues vote on this to tell the president, don't go back to war without coming to Congress. The Trump administration announced, and the timing of this was sort of fortuitous for a reason I'll describe, announced that they were handing over the functions of the Special Ed Office and the Rehabilitative Services Office at the Department of Education. They're handing it over to HHS. Now, obviously, the president ran and said he would get rid of the Department of Education. He said that on the trail. but it's a matter of statute that we have a Department of Education. And so if you want to get rid of it, you have to get Congress's approval. And the president has 2 Republican houses. He could have decided to get Congress's approval, but he chose not to do that. Instead, he treated the Department of Education like it was a going out of business sale of a discount furniture outlet, and has just tried to hand off this piece and that piece willy-nilly. Give you some examples. Student loan portfolio, huge part of the Department of Education. They said, well, we're going to give that to the Small Business Administration, who didn't want it, and they weren't staffed for it, and they ultimately wouldn't take it. So now they're trying to give it to the Department of Treasury, who didn't want it, who's not staffed for it. And if they are forced to take it, I don't think they're going to do a good job in servicing student loan borrowers. Career and technical education, they said, well, we're just going to hand that over to the Department of Labor. They didn't want it. They weren't staffed for it. And now the Department of Labor has imploded because of the scandalous behavior of Secretary DeRemer, who was forced to resign. And so the nation's career and tech programs, which are really important, are now in an agency that is just riven with controversy and unable to effectively manage it. But of all the things at the Department of Education, the one thing we were most concerned about, and we raised this in the confirmation hearing with Secretary McMahon, was the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. If the DOE does not enforce that law, there are huge pressures on states and local governments, primarily budgetary pressures, that lead them to shortcut or ignore or avoid or water down enforcement of the law. It has to be enforced by the DOE. And so this week, the White House announced what we believed they would do, but they moved forward on a provision of put this in the hands of HHS, whose cabinet secretary is a quack. Even Republicans who voted for Secretary Kennedy now regret having voted for him. And parents of kids with disabilities and adults with disabilities are very worried about taking this important function and putting it in the hands of a vaccine skeptic and somebody who takes all kinds of anti-science positions. So this morning, we actually had a markup of a set of bills in the Help Committee. None were directly on point, but there was one bill dealing with fair access for folks with disabilities to transplants. I was actually a co-sponsor of the bill. It's named in honor of a very courageous young Virginian who got a transplant, but there was some chance she might not get a transplant because she was disabled. And so this is a civil rights bill to make sure that people with disabilities are not discriminated against in the choices of being organ recipients. I actually offered an amendment to the bill to say, don't transfer this function out of DOE. I didn't want to offer an amendment to a bill that I supported that was going to make it controversial. Thank goodness my committee chair, Chairman Cassidy, said, hey, Kane, I agree with you. We shouldn't take special ed out of DOE. We shouldn't give it to HHS. But don't put your amendment in the middle of this bipartisan bill because it might make the bill go sideways. And he made a commitment to me that we would work out a bipartisan proposal before the next markup we have next month, and we'll either reach an accord or I get to offer my don't transfer it out of the DOE amendment standalone at the next markup we have. So the good news is we got good bipartisan legislation done, but I've got a commitment from my Help Committee chairman that we're going to take up this issue of the unwise transfer. Finally, real quick, then I'll open it up. I did an amendment yesterday that narrowly failed to overturn a Trump regulation that essentially guts all immigration appeals. Folks who are in the immigration courts every day, they're trying to make an asylum claim. I will be subject to persecution because of my religion if you send me back, because of my political position if you send me back, because of gang violence in my neighborhood if you send me back, because of my ethnicity if you send me back. That's been a longstanding pillar of American and international immigration law. You should be able to make an asylum claim. And this is really important, but the Trump administration has essentially gutted appeals. Deportation cases are all about family separation. I mean, if somebody gets deported, they usually are a member of a family where they may not have legal status, but they usually have family members who do. deportation cases are almost always family separation cases, and not every judge gets it right all the time. Sometimes judges don't get it right because the quality of the lawyering before them is bad, and that's why we have an appeals process. An appeals process is the American judicial system's recognition that judges are fallible and can make mistakes, and whether it's a civil case or a criminal case or an administrative case, there ought to be an appeal. So I challenged the Trump regulation, essentially gutting immigration appeals yesterday. I did get 2 Republican votes. I needed 5 to prevail, so we fell short. But I'm going to keep battling for the rights of all to have appeals heard, since I know that judges are not fallible. And I say that as a guy whose wife was a judge. My wife, Ann, was a juvenile court judge, and the hardest cases for her when she was a juvenile court judge, even more than crimes or, a young person accused of murder or a young person who's been the victim of horrible, child abuse or a sexual assault. The hardest cases for my wife were the termination of parental rights cases, family separation. You're looking across the desk at a mother or father who's done some bad things, and you, the judge, have the responsibility to say, I'm terminating your rights as a parent forever. Those were the hardest cases for my wife. And she was so glad that there was an appellate court that could look over her shoulder. She didn't view that as a bad thing. She viewed it as a good thing. And it's the same way that immigration judges look at deportation cases or asylum cases. They do the very best job they have with very busy dockets, but they understand that having an appellate court look over your shoulder is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's elemental to the American way of justice. With that, let me take a couple of questions.
Our first question is from Chris from WAVY.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, Senator. You had mentioned the memorandum of understanding with the Iran deal. Wanted to see what the comparison was with the JCPOA from 9 years ago, 11 years ago, whatever that was. And also, if this is a treaty, why is the Senate not being sought for advice and consent?
No, great question, Chris. So let me just say this. The administration hasn't briefed us on this. And so all I know is from a Bloomberg article that printed what appeared to be the MOU. And I think there are either 14 or 18 paragraphs. And I read it and I compared it to the JCPOA. And I see a number of instances where this is much weaker. But rather than go through each one, maybe they got it wrong, or maybe there's still negotiation taking place. So my overall assessment from the review of the Bloomberg piece is that we are getting a lot less than we had under the JCPOA, and we're giving up a whole lot more to get it. I will give more specifics when I actually see the final deal, and that may be as early as Friday. With respect to congressional review, it's styled as a memorandum of understanding, not as a treaty. Treaties have to get 2/3 vote in the Senate. And many presidents have done things that are short of treaty, but I wrote a bill called the Iran Nuclear Review Act that was passed by a veto-proof margin when President Obama was president, that requires any president doing a nuclear deal with Iran to submit that to Congress. And so if the deal we see Friday, makes agreements with respect to the Iranian nuclear program, it will have to be submitted to Congress. There's some chance that the deal will deal with things like opening the Straits of Hormuz and ending the blockade of Iranian ports and stopping bombardment back and forth, and just agree to keep talking about the nuclear program. If that's the only reference to the nuclear program, and we're going to keep talking about it, I'm not sure that has to be submitted to Congress. But when there is ultimately a deal, it will have to be submitted to Congress pursuant to the bill that I got passed during President Obama's second term.
Next is Abby from CBS 19.
Hey, Abby.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Yep.
I was just wondering if you believe that the MOU reflects the objectives that the president laid out before the conflict began, and then if the terms are violated or not ratified, what are the potential consequences?
Well, it's again, you have me at a disadvantage because I've seen public reporting, but I haven't seen the understanding. Here, the president has said a million things about what his objectives are: to stop a nuclear program, to change out a regime, to stop the development of missiles. He's gone round and round and round about what the goal is, although the most frequently expressed goal is he wanted to stop Iran's nuclear program. But this is what makes so many of us so frustrated. When President Trump became president, we had stopped their nuclear program. The JCPOA that we negotiated with Iran and with our European allies and with Russia and China and with the International Atomic Energy Agency, on the first page of that deal, Iran reaffirmed that it would never seek, acquire, or develop nuclear weapons. Never. So it was a forever pledge that they would never seek, acquire, or develop nuclear weapons. And then the agreement went on to limit centrifuges, limit enrichment of uranium, limit nuclear research, mandate intrusive inspections in nuclear facilities all over the country. But the president had an agreement when he became president in 2017, and Iran had agreed not to have a nuclear program, and the agreement was working. And President Trump's own Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State said, don't tear up the agreement, keep the agreement. When he tore it up, he basically gave Iran a green light to restart their nuclear program. Iran had no enriched uranium when he became president. They have hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium now because Donald Trump tore up the deal. So if he wanted to accomplish the goal of a non-nuclear Iran, why did he tear up the diplomatic deal that had guaranteed that Iran would not be nuclear? And by all accounts, the agreement that we're going to see Friday, even if it touches on the Iranian nuclear program, is not going to be the full deal. They still have to negotiate what happens with the nuclear program. So an off-ramp to an illegal war is a good thing, but what I've seen about this deal suggests we're giving up a whole lot more to get a whole lot less. And then what happens if Iran violates the agreement? In the JCPOA, a violation of the agreement would be brought to the International Atomic Energy Agency. And if they determine Iran was violating the agreement, the sanctions that the global community had imposed on Iran would snap back, would go back into place. So there was a dispute resolution mechanism. Also, if Iran didn't think the U.S. was living up to our end of like sanctions relief or something, they could also have a dispute resolution mechanism within the IAEA. I don't know what the dispute resolution mechanism is here. Donald Trump said, if you do stuff I don't like, I'm going to start dropping bombs on your head again. That is not a dispute resolution mechanism. Threatening to go back into an illegal, foolish war that has needlessly cost American lives, Iranian civilian lives, hurt the global economy and impose costs on American families, that is not the right solution. So we'll see when the deal comes out Friday. Maybe there's a dispute resolution mechanism in there, but so far it sounds like the mechanism is Donald Trump saying I could just restart the war whenever the hell I want.
Next is Maddie from Nexstar DC.
Hey, Maddie.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for taking the time. Just wanted to see, what do you see as the path forward in reauthorizing FISA with today's confirmation hearing postponed for Jay Clayton? And kind of when do you see that process resuming?
I am very puzzled. I was in a markup in the Health Committee all morning, and the notion that Donald Trump is now pulling back on that nominee, why is he doing it? The DNI position is important. He proposed somebody who was unqualified, didn't meet the statutory qualification for the position. He forwarded a better nominee. I still have some questions about him, but he was clearly better, and he has national security credentials. It would seem like the president would want a DNI, and getting a DNI is key to getting FISA reauthorized. It would seem like the president would want FISA reauthorized, and the nation is at some security risk if FISA lapses. So because I was in a hearing all morning, I haven't really been able to figure out what's going through the president's head that he would want to slow down the reauthorization of FISA.
Next is Mitchell from WTOP.
Hey, Mitchell.
Hi there, Senator. Just to follow up on that, Senator Cotton just a few minutes ago actually confirmed that Jay Clayton will not appear at the hearing today, so it will have to be pushed back. The president today also reiterated the fact that he still wants Bill Pulte in that position. I just wanted to get more of your reaction to all of these developments. I'm sure that the Senate Majority Leader probably has to take a couple of ibuprofen right now.
Pulte is a disaster. And the fact that Trump wants him in, even temporarily, suggests that he wants Pulte to get in there for a while so he can dig up intel dirt on President Trump's political opponents. Pulte has zero national security experience. He doesn't meet the statutory requirement for the job. The only thing he's known for is he's a guy who is willing to use whatever dirt he can find to go after President Trump's political enemies. The DNI position is to try to keep Americans safe. The DNI position is not to allow somebody to run roughshod over President Trump's political appointment. So maybe the whole reason for the delay is Trump just is unhappy that he doesn't have more dirt on his political opponents. But that should make the American public really nervous. It makes me really nervous.
Those were all of our questions.
All
Thank
right,
you for
thanks,
joining
guys.
today, and we'll follow up shortly with a video link.
Okay.